Thank you so much for taking the time to be with us here today.
It's such a pleasure, Thanos. Thank you for inviting me.
It's a real honor and privilege to have the opportunity to have this conversation with you that I hope it's going to be not a boring conversation, really discussing again typical things, but I would like to define with you throughout the conversation what makes a great leader today, because you have been in high scale leadership positions in your past career, and I'm sure you can share some valuable lessons.
Well, thank you for that. I think it is very important, Thanos, as we think about leadership qualities. The first in my mind is integrity. You have to do everything with the utmost integrity. I think very importantly, too, is empathy. It's so important for leaders to be super empathetic and really understand what their team members need. And also, I think it is incredibly important for leaders to lead by example, to cast a shadow in the organization that they want to see, create a wonderful culture in the organization. And that means paying it forward, throwing the ladder down for the next generation of leaders, and making sure that you have a super inclusive environment where everybody's thoughts, ideas are heard, because that's what really drives innovation and progress.
Do you think that someone could say this would be an ideal description of what an environment consists of, and give access to future leaders to create and offer their expertise? But is this the ideal case? Is this the ideal environment? Because sometimes ideal description from the reality can have some sort of a distance.
Thanos, that's my ideal description. That's the way that I lead, because I think it's so important that leadership isn't about a platform for yourself, but rather it is about lifting the future generations of leaders up and helping equip the future generations of leaders with all the things that you've learned and imparting those pieces of advice and wisdom to the next generation of leaders so they can be even more successful and rise up with you, right? Because that's the type of culture you want. You want to create a safe space where everybody feels valued, that you're empowering your team, and you're helping lift up the next generation of leaders.
What would be the principles or the assets that someone, an aspiring leader, could have for their future and could demonstrate throughout their career and their work? Like, everything is a process. I mean, you develop the skills, you cultivate the skills, you strengthen your skills, and you try to improve some other aspects of your personality as a leader as you grow. What is the role of having a great mentor in this process, and how has your role been as a great mentor to younger generations?
I think it is so important to serve as a great mentor to the younger generation. And I think it's important, Thanos, that we think about mentorship not just as one directional upward, but also multidimensional. For me, it's always about having senior mentors, peer mentors, and junior mentors across a variety of different industries, so you can get feedback from different perspectives and angles as well. And I think it is incredibly important when you think about a senior, peer, and junior, that you're challenging yourself with the newness and the innovations that are coming out of your junior mentors, for example. So for me, reverse mentoring has yielded some of the most interesting, out-of-the-box, innovative ideas that we've created and adapted as a team as well. So think of mentorship not just one way up, which many people do, but as multidimensional, and be open. Again, as I was saying, listen well, be open to ideas, embrace new concepts. That's how you're all going to win together as a team.
And I'm sure you grew up and you developed yourself as a leader throughout the decades. How do you see the new leaders coming up under the scope and the light of the technological advancements? The social media, the interaction that the humans have right now through social media, this affects the style of leadership, I assume. What do you think?
It does, but I certainly hope that that means that the future leaders are going to lean in even more on communicating, more on connecting with people. Because while I agree with you, there's so many advancements in technology. There's so much that AI is going to contribute to in all of our industries, helping with productivity, helping with efficiencies. And we all have to adopt those types of enhancements in our business and unlock the enormous potential there. But we as leaders then need to make sure that we understand our team's use of these technologies, that we're helping guide through the process, that we don't lose sight of the importance of the human connection. Just like you and I are sitting here today having this discussion, you seeing the way that I'm reacting, the emotions that I'm having, that the language, the body language, you cannot get that over a Zoom or via technology. So it's even more important that our next generation leaders know how to responsibly adopt the tech and also responsibly train their teams to adopt the tech and lean in ever so more to the importance and the power of human connection.
Have you seen the younger generation? We discussed this before our interview started.
Yeah.
Have you seen the younger generation being a little bit more reserved about the prospect of real human interaction in the leadership levels in corporate world? I think everyone has been a little bit more comfortable in the environment of the virtual interaction and some sort of hesitant about the in-person interaction.
I haven't seen that yet, Thanos, in my industry. My industry is obviously wealth management and private banking, and it's so important, the person-to-person human interaction. And quite candidly, I think that we see younger generations thrive the most when they're in person because they're learning. You know, we have an apprenticeship model in the business, which is the younger learn from the older, generation when we're all sitting together and working together. I think it's very hard to replace with online, with not being in person. So I really personally lean into the fact that we need more human to human interaction, and that all of the social, the technology, all of that is enhancements, but we've got to view it as that.
I've seen some of your previous interviews where you were asked about the AI and how the AI will transform business and the workspace. I've seen a more optimistic aspect.
I don't think my opinion is optimistic at all. I think that AI is here to stay. I think we need to embrace AI and all of the competencies and the unbelievable value that it's going to unlock, efficiency, productivity for all industries globally. What I think we have to realize is that AI is not an enemy. It is something we should all embrace. And yes, it will displace numerous jobs. In fact, it touches almost 20% of jobs today, and it will touch many, many more in the future. But we also have to remember that AI, while displacing some of these jobs, is also going to create new opportunities and new jobs, right? So we just have to be mindful of how to deploy the AI, how to unlock the productivity amongst our teams, and to make sure that we're using it in the most productive, most efficient way. And that goes back to making sure that your future teams are getting the right skill set, the right training to adopt and deploy AI to maximize the benefits.
And also making sure that the younger generations have access to constant and continuing learning.
Yes, indeed. And that is something that I am very much focused on as a leader, is to make sure that the generations below us have the right tools to be successful. And that includes ongoing education. My team hears from me all the time that I'm an avid and voracious learner. That means I read multiple books a day. I read the news, like we consume it so much every day. And that's what we need to do to stay relevant in our business, right? We need to stay ahead of the trend. We need to understand how to use it. We need to understand how to educate our workforce to make sure that they are as adept and as equipped as possible to utilize the benefits of AI.
Would another element be the access to multiculturalism, access to the opportunity to be open and have access to different perspectives and cultures? We've discussed about your background, where you were raised, where you're coming from, where you worked in Europe, and you have been having like a great international perspective about global business, finance, and about the social context of our everyday lives through your multicultural background. How important is that?
Oh, Thanos, I think it is so incredibly important. I've had the great benefit. I'm an American-born Chinese. So my brother and I were born and raised outside of San Francisco, California, but I was raised very biculturally. Every summer we would spend in Asia. And as I mentioned to you earlier, I had the pleasure of being a foreign exchange student in Spain during my high school years as well. So that ability to see, witness, live in multiple geographies and countries around the world has really shaped me as a global citizen. And I'm very proud of the fact that I have had this privilege and this pleasure of living in different cultures around the world. And that has really helped me as a leader today too. Because as you can imagine, when you're running a global business, you have to be very open. You have to be very open to different traditions, customs. You have to understand how to navigate in different environments and different geographies around the world. You have to understand cultural nuances. And I think that my experiences growing up have been hugely beneficial in that regard in helping me be a true global citizen.
And in your career, have there been any challenging moments for your leadership, challenging moments for yourself as a person that you needed to manage them and to show resilience?
Of course. I mean, I can name a few as
Yes,
an example,
I would love to.
Thanos, because I started my career as investment banker. I did investment banking for 7 years, half the time in New York, half the time in Asia, out of Hong Kong. Again, multicultural background and experience, very helpful there. And after 7 years in investment banking, I was absolutely burnt out. I was working 120-hour weeks. I was pulling an all-nighter once, twice every week, 7 days a week. Very grueling and intensive hours, right? So I had a moment of reflection and I said to myself, what else can I be doing? And luckily I had 2 offers out of college. One was to be a fashion buyer and one was to be an investment banker. So I had kept in touch with my wonderful network of fashion contacts. And I decided to reach back out and test the idea of being in the fashion industry. So as you know, I pivoted then from investment banking into running a global women's wear design firm. And the designer that I work with, Vivian Tam, is a remarkable individual, an amazing leader, one of the only Chinese designers to come to the US and be successful globally. And it was a privilege and a pleasure to work with her, you know, in flexing. But you have to remember, I took a pivot into a completely different industry. I took a big risk. I took a step back in terms of compensation and all of that, right? But you have to be open to taking a couple steps back in some cases to move forward. And then again, when I was in the fashion industry, I noticed a massive void in the wealth management space for fashion designers, because every designer would ask me, what stock should I buy? What bond should I buy? How should I invest my money?
And I'm sure they keep asking you these questions.
They do. They do. Yeah. So again, another opportunity. And I boldly pitched a new concept to Citi that didn't exist before. That was risky, right? But we had to think outside of the box. We spotted an opportunity and we launched it. You know, it was very, very, very successful. So again, sometimes you have to take a calculated risk or two to move forward and to advance.
But taking risks means that you are prepared to be able to take risks. Not all people take risks easily, right? What makes a person be able to take risks and move forward?
That's a very good question, Thanos, and it's something that I see often, both in different cultures and differences between men and women as well in the industry, that oftentimes women and some Asian women, for example, so I'm going to speak from a personal perspective, we're very risk averse. So we are less inclined to put our hands up for the next job. We think that if we work hard and put our heads down, that we're going to tap on the shoulder for the next opportunity, where in reality, you have to be very adept at communicating your contributions. You have to be very adept at being your own best cheerleader. You have to be very adept at communication with your managers and the people above you to tell them what your goals, objectives, and desires are. You can't expect any of us to be mind readers. So I think that there are some things about risk-taking that we need to be conscious of and that we need to advocate a bit more for ourselves, because if you don't ask for it, you're not going to get it.
And have you seen, like in your teams, people who have been reserved about expressing their minds, expressing their fears, expressing their thinking, and feeling that if they say something more than what they expected is the limit, they will have some repercussions or things will not go well for them?
I hope that the members of my team don't ever feel like they can't speak up. And one of the qualities of a great leader is to be able to get your teams to contribute. When you know that there's a very intelligent person on your team that tends to be a bit more shy or not as outspoken, it's your job as a leader to pull it out, to ask the questions, to make sure that they're contributing to the discussion, right? Because there's a reason why they're the people sitting around the table. And it's your job as a leader, again, to unlock all of those ideas and the great contributions from the members of your team.
Let's go a little bit back to the fashion industry. And my question is, how have you been able to combine the strict corporate finance leadership and on the other side, the need for creativity that fashion entails? Fashion comes with creativity, and corporate environment comes with some sort of strictness and structure in
Yes.
especially in the field of finance. How these two elements can live together as part of your personality.
So it's interesting that you say that, because I went from a very corporate environment, investment banking, to a very creative environment, which was fashion, working with Vivian Tam. And Vivian's a dear, dear friend of mine even today. And I have to tell you, when I first walked into her office, everybody said, "What is she doing here? She's an investment banker. She's so corporate." But the reality is I could bring a new perspective into the business that they didn't have before, right? A structure, an analysis that they didn't look at before, where we helped her launch a new dress line, which doubled her top line revenues, where we opened markets for her where she didn't have presence before in Europe, where we opened freestanding stores for her and established collaborations with other large companies on her behalf as well. So thinking a little bit differently than what they've done added enormous value. But also, you have to get used to getting into the office at 2 a.m. for creative meetings. It's like a very different world. And, at the end of the day, I like elements of both. And that's why I decided to combine the best of both worlds onto private banking when I spotted the opportunity in fashion. Because I do like a little more structure, to be very honest with you. But I love the creativity. I love the work that designers do around the world, and passionate about supporting them. And that's how I brought the best of both worlds together onto the Citi Private Bank platform.
What are the aspects that you like in your job in the field of finance? If you can bring one or two elements up to our discussion, and what are the one or two things that you don't like, that you would like to not exist, or you would like to have them changed?
That's a great question. So the thing, it's hard to just pinpoint one thing that I like, but I will give you some ideas. For me, it is so incredibly rewarding. It's a privilege to serve the wonderful clients that I've had the privilege of serving for the last 20 years around the world, some of the most significant families around the world, helping be their trusted advisor, helping them think about all aspects of wealth management, legacy planning, helping them think through their business strategies, helping them think through their children, grandchildren. All the elements of being a family advisor to me is one of the most rewarding things, and really understanding that I am a fiduciary for them, right? Doing the best thing that I can for them and their families is tremendously rewarding. On top of that, I know you asked me for one, I have to say another. It is so extraordinarily rewarding for me to build great teams and to see those teams thrive, and to build the bench for the next generation of talent in wealth management. That's something that I'm immensely, immensely proud of. And especially making sure that it's an inclusive environment where multiple perspectives are valued and encouraged. So for me, those are the two things that I love the most and that I feel very passionately about. Conversely, since you asked me the question, where do I think there needs to be some improvement, and what are the most frustrating things? I think the most frustrating things for me is that, I have a very unique vantage point, Thanos. So I have on the one hand the glass ceiling, on the other hand what we call the bamboo ceiling, which is the ceiling for Asians. And on the one side, the glass ceiling has been effectively shattered in many ways, right? We've had more women leaders. We have more board representation. But on the bamboo ceiling side, you might be surprised to know that only 3% of Fortune 500 CEOs are of Asian background, and most of them are South Asian, not East Asian. So, there's still a really big gap and a void on this side. And I think that we all need to do more work together to help be more inclusive, to help educate others on some of the nuances of the values that we were, brought up with, some of the traditions that we have that may not express well in corporate America, right? We're taught to be humble, to be modest, never to boast, never to brag, work hard, put your head down, don't speak up. And those are exactly the things that you shouldn't be doing if you like to get ahead in corporate America. You have to have a voice. You have to communicate well. You have to be an advocate for yourself. So those are some of the things, again, culturally, that we should be making others more aware of. So when someone says that person doesn't have the leadership qualities because they're so quiet, that we don't say things like that, right? That we take away some of these unconscious and conscious biases to really unlock the power of a diverse, inclusive team.
The role of the family. How has this contributed to your success?
1,000%, Thanos, 1,000%. I mean, starting from my parents who were immigrants to the United States, my mother and father met when they were in college here after coming from Taiwan to San Francisco, California. And I saw what it was like to be raised in an immigrant family. We had very little growing up, right? And I saw the hard work ethic, the optimistic can-do attitude. My father started a business which failed when we were very young, but he didn't, give up. He in fact doubled up and even more optimistically went out and started a venture capital business, which ended up being incredibly successful. But that shaped my brother and I from a young age, watching this can-do attitude, the optimism, the way, the approach, of my father was very infectious for my brother and I. That coupled with my mom, who is one of the biggest-hearted, kindest-hearted people that I know, she taught my brother and I to treat every single person with respect, and we do that. And it's so important, that you treat everybody well, in my humble opinion. So that's had a huge impact on my leadership style. And that coupled with my husband, who is the most supportive person, that no successful leader, no successful woman or man can be successful without the support of their partner.
That's right.
So luckily, my husband and I are 20 years married this year, and we've grown up in the business together. He's been the most supportive of me in my career. And now I have 2 young children, and I hope that my 9 and 11-year-olds will have the benefit of looking up and saying, it's possible.
What's next for you? I've heard you have some plans coming up that we all look forward to learning more. If you can mention something or imply something, because I don't ask you to reveal plans that are not announced yet.
Well, Thanos, what I can share with you is that I'm so excited about my next venture. I am looking forward to doing this with purpose, with impact. I'm looking forward to taking all the lessons that I've learned in my 25, 26-year career and applying that to this new venture. And let's just put it this way. Over the last 20 years, I have spotted so many opportunities in wealth management more broadly globally. And I look forward to solutions and solving and bringing a lot more innovative solutions to the clients that we serve globally.
In the current environment, political and financial and economic environment, is there any predictions you can make about how the economy will evolve? Do you see any risks in the horizon, or you keep your optimism because you're a deeply optimistic person?
I'm a deeply optimistic person, but I cannot say that I'm deeply optimistic about the state of the global affairs. Let's put it that way, right? Because I would say that 5 years, 10 years ago, no one was talking about geopolitical risks as top of the table, and now that's top of the table, right? So we're navigating in an ever complex environment where US-China tensions continue to be very, very high. You're seeing decoupling instead of globalization. You're seeing nationalistic behavior, inward turning of many economies around the world, especially the largest US and the second largest China. That has implications for investors around the world. I think the most important thing is that the families that we have been advising around the world are long-term sophisticated investors. And as long as you have their objectives set properly for the long term, the near-term noise should not distract from that. Mm-hmm. Okay, so as long as you fully understand what the goals and objectives are for your clients around the world, investors around the world, you should stay the course, right? But you can make some strategic shifts along the way. And where I'm seeing the most interesting opportunities today is international investors looking at more private and direct investment opportunities rather than market, right? In the US today, we're seeing still some very interesting opportunities in fixed income, right? So some pretty decent yields in the fixed income space, and really a big shift into alternatives. Looking at interesting opportunities for extra alpha generation in private markets, which continues to be a huge trend.
And about the current trade talks between US and China, I feel that you would agree with that the cultural background, the cultural way that Americans and Chinese negotiate is also completely different, which creates even further distance between the two sides when you have two parties negotiating in a different way, and this creates extra difficulties for the one party to understand the other.
Thanos, I think that we would all be in a much better space if we truly approached every discussion, every negotiation with a mindset of openness, mm-hmm. of making sure that you understand the other side, of putting yourself in the other side's shoes and trying to be very open and encourage more dialogue rather than coming to the table with this is it, right? Because that doesn't help with the openness that we need, right, to have productive conversations.
And the role of the media, how do you see the role of the media in all this landscape, political and financial?
Thanos, I think that the media is actually one of the most important, if not the most critical element of the communication that's happening around the world. So it's very important that the media knows the role that it's playing and the strength of the role that it's playing. Of course, it does globally, and making sure that those perspectives are known and heard.
I would like to conclude our conversation with a question about what is your greatest fear and what is your greatest hope for the future?
Wow, that's a big question. You know, my greatest hope is that we can all lead with a lot of passion, with a lot of empathy, that we lead with impact, with purpose, that we don't just think about how well our company is doing, how well our people are doing, which are very important, but what kind of impact we're making to society as a whole, as a large, and I hope that we can move the needle there too. That is my greatest hope. My greatest hope also is that we can all communicate with a huge amount of empathy and openness with one another. I think the results will be much, much, much greater if we approach everything with an open mind.
As a society.
As a society. I think my greatest fear is I certainly hope that we won't get too closed, you know, where we kind of become almost backward looking in the way that we're approaching many things and many topics and many issues. So like, let's make sure that we're progressing in the right way towards a harmonious, global, open framework where we can collaborate better and where everybody can succeed together.
In a political and social context, right?
Exactly, in both.
Thank you so much for the pleasure of our conversation.
Thank you, Thanos. It's a pleasure.
Thank you.